looking before, but now I stand tall. In the light of love, I'm healing through it all. The pain that held me down is fading. New life in me, love's recreating. Healing from trauma, it's lifting me higher, higher, me higher, lifting me higher. From the ashes I rise, my soul's on fire, my soul's on fire. Strength is in my veins, courage in my stride. I'm the captain of my soul, the storm's my guide. The pain that held me down is fading. New life in me, love's recreating. Healing from trauma, it's lifting me higher. From behind.
Hi, I'm DeWeylla Malone, host of Healing from Trauma, and I want to welcome you to Season 3, where we kick off with an exclusive interview of myself giving a personal testimony concerning the Incubus spirit. Now, the Bible doesn't explicitly talk about these spirits, but it does warn us against sexual immorality, where these can be open doors for this spirit to enter. I am calling this the Real and Raw series. It will be a series of testimonies and interviews where we talk about these different things that are not widely talked about within the religious or faith-based settings. Now, the interview is not for children, so you do want to ask your children to leave the room at this time. I thought it would be important for us to kick off this series with this specific topic due to all of the essay allegations and things that are in the news and media today. I want you to know where these things derive from. So buckle up your seatbelt and get ready for this exclusive interview. God bless you. Okay, well, I am DeWeylla Malone, pastor, apostle, all the titles. But first and foremost, I'm a servant. And I am 44 years old. I currently am, I'm finishing up my doctoral degree, yay, in biblical psychology. And I currently am an accountant for the state, and I do a lot of different ministry professions such as counseling, flyer design, all sorts of things for people who are like starting ministry, starting a business, things like that. And so one of the things that is near and dear to my heart is the podcast, Healing from Trauma. And so that is what I've been kind of venturing more into, is just really highlighting a lot of different subjects about trauma.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about the tormented by Incubus. So what is the Incubus spirit?
Ooh, okay. So Incubus spirit is basically, a lot of people think it's a myth. Of course, they say it's in folklore, but it is a male demon who seeks to have intercourse with a sleeping woman. And then the counterpart to incubus would be succubus. That's the one that would come in men's erotic dreams and things like that. So the incubus spirit is, the word incubus from the Latin word actually means a nightmare from a demon or something like that. And so basically this is a thing that comes and like sits on the person in the night. And so a lot of people will say they have sleep paralysis, feel like they can't breathe, different things like that, or they can't move. Different things like that will occur. And then, of course, they'll have the actual sensual dreams and things like that. In medieval Europe, a fact that I know is that some people actually thought that this was how you would birth witches, would be that the incubus spirit would sleep with a human person, and witches and things will be birthed from that.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. So I'm assuming today we're going to be talking about your experiences with this.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, first I want to kind of highlight why I think it's important that we talk about it and why we learn about it, is because there's a lot of people, especially believers and Christians, who do not believe in this. Or they'll be like, oh, that's not nothing. They just believe that the person is just promiscuous. For whatever reason, they're just promiscuous, and they don't know that this is an actual thing that is tormenting them, that's causing them to have these actions and sometimes reactions. So I think it's important to talk about it, because the things that you think are myth, there are people who are unbelievers who think that the Bible is about a bunch of mythical characters. So you have to look at it on both sides. If they don't think that those things are real, that the God is not real, this Holy Spirit is not real, but you do, And then you're on the other side saying, well, these things aren't real, but people are encountering them. These are real things that they are actually encountering. And so that's why I think it's important that we kind of share it and talk about it. Now, my personal experience, and the way in which I believe it opened up or it started was through lust or through fornication.
Okay. Okay.
So we know in 1 Corinthians 6, it talks about fleeing fornication, right? What I love about the verse I think it's verse 18, it splits it up. So it says flee fornication, and then it puts a period.
Oh,
Before he even says why we need to flee fornication, he said flee fornication, period.
like that's it.
That's it. Like, and so anytime the Bible is telling you to flee something, you need to pay attention. Okay. And especially because there was just a period put there. And so the word fornication actually comes from the Greek word porneia, where we get pornography from. And so when you look deeper into that, the porneia is anything that's harlotry, adultery, including incest. It's idolatry, and it's even what they call sexual immorality. And so but those are the works of the flesh. Like, I think 3 or 4 of them that I named was from the works of the flesh. That comes from Galatians. When you look in Galatians, it talks about walking in the spirit.
Okay.
And if you walk in the spirit, what? You won't fulfill the lust of the flesh. That word lust is a longing. The word lust is also the longing that it wants is for something that is forbidden, something that it can't have. It's a desire. It's a craving. And so that is the open door for how it started and how I experienced it from a young child, is that the door of lust was open. And so it's like this thing where it just progresses. So it goes from lust, and then it's in your thoughts, and then it goes into fornication. Then it comes into this thing where you experience incubus, which didn't actually happen until later. But I'll just give you a small piece of the childhood piece of it, is where it started like with simply playing as a child. And then those innocent, playful acts turn into something else.
Oh, yeah.
And you're touching and you're discovering and you're doing all those things. So I can remember at a very early age, and this is on both sides of my family, sleepovers at grandma's house. Both sides of my family. It didn't matter. It was like each place that I went to, something like this ended up happening. You know, we're having a sleepover or whatever, and then somebody's touching somebody or whatever. And it's like, what is going on here? And everywhere I go, I'm starting to encounter this. And so I believe that one thing that I know is true is that the word says the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, right? Well, he stole identity right then in that moment. He stole identity from the beginning, because I think now this is who I
It's
am.
normal,
Obviously, yeah. This is a normal thing. Obviously, if it's happening on both sides of my family, I'm
It's
like, oh, this is
supposed
what
to be,
people do.
right.
Yeah.
You talked about your experience being at both sides of your parents' house and stuff. So, do you know if there was a specific event that this spirit kind of you first started noticing the spirit that you could think back on?
Not specific, because it is literally kind of, it's like I have spots where I can remember things, and it's like I'm in and out. I'm like weaving in and out of what I experienced as a young child. I often tell people that I don't remember anything that happened in my childhood before the age of 8. And then there's a gap between the age of 8 and 12. However, the gap in between 8 and 12 is where I remember these flashes of when I'm being inappropriately touched by cousins and adult members of the family on both sides. And you think about it, both sides of my family believed in the Lord, but there was one side that was like avid, they were going to church and stuff like that. And then the other side that kind of like did go to church, but they kind of partied and drank and did things like that. And so the thing about it is, even on the side that believed in the Lord and was like going to church, obey, they didn't cuss, they didn't drink, they didn't do that stuff. It's happening over there too. And so again, that's the reason why I was thinking it was a normal thing. The flashes that happen between ages 8 and 12 years old is what I remember being opened up to it. And what I know now that I did not know then is that spirits have a smell. And even though we would again be at our grandparents' house or whatever. We take baths, we washed up and everything. You smell, and it was like I could smell the soap, but then I could smell something else too.
Oh, okay.
And I was thinking, well, maybe they just didn't clean themselves good or
Right.
something
They
like
forgot to
that.
get that one spot or
Right.
something.
But later on in life, that would come up again, and I would recognize that I was smelling a spirit.
Wow. So with that, and those events that you experienced at that age, how did those particular things affect your life as an adult?
Oh my goodness. So this really kind of shaped the next 20 years of my life. Because like I said, it was like I was encountering it in every place that I went. Um, and so when I was 13, I lost my virginity. And becomes the downward spiral of everything because I lose my virginity at age 13, thinking that the person I lost my virginity to is like my sweetheart and we're going to be together forever. Like this is my boyfriend now, because, when you're that young, your mind is not
Right.
registering
Mature
that.
enough.
Yeah, it's not mature enough. You're not registering that. And then this is a person who's already been sexually active. I'd never been sexually active. So it's like, this is, he's running through girls. And so I'm thinking this is like going to be my boyfriend now, but that wasn't the case. I was just one of the sexual encounters. So from that moment, I went in kind of a downward spiral, and I started to think that I can control this. So if they hurt me in that way, I'm going to make sure that I'm not hurt anymore, but I'm going to be the one that says what I do, who I sleep with, I'm going to be the one to control it now.
Okay.
And so in trying to do that, because I do need to take you to two ages in my teens, and then we can go to the adults. But from 13, in order for me to do that, it was like I still was going to have that seductive spirit about myself, but I thought that I was in control. I thought that I was in charge. And in age 16, I got pregnant. And by this time, because I had almost kind of allowed that thing to like just really, I'm not going to say take over me, but for moments at a time, I would allow it to. By the time I was 16 years old, I had already slept with about 20 something people.
Wow.
And I'm 16. And I'm pregnant.
Mm.
So there was a lot that was happening every time that I was going through these things, to the point where I didn't realize how it was destroying me. Like I was being destroyed. And the verse of scripture that I just told you about in 1 Corinthians, after it says flee fornication, then it begins to tell you why. It says because the person who commits sins, they normally commit the sin outside of their body. But the person who commits fornication commits sin to his own body. And what people don't realize, I think, because, lust and sexual immorality, that's such a nasty, dirty thing. And I know a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on that sin above the other sins, and they should. Because when it talks about it destroying your own body, there are a couple of things that are happening here. It's not just the sin that's destroying you. It is also you breaking a commandment. Because if you're sinning against your own body, that takes you to Matthew 22, where he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, you're not loving yourself if you're sinning against your own body. So now you've broken a commandment, which means you've also broken a covenant with the Lord. And if you can't keep covenant with the Lord, how do you expect to have a good relationship? How do you expect to be committed to anybody? And so this is what this spirit did. It came and stole my identity. Then it came and stole my authenticity in wanting to have a true relationship with someone, because when the sin destroys the body, it literally disintegrates the person from being able to have a good relationship with anybody, from being able to commune with anybody.
Wow. Okay, so you've talked about how that physically affected you, and even the spiritual part of it. Tell us about the emotional implications that this had on you.
The emotional implications lasted like for years, even after I came out of agreement, basically with the sin. But the emotional implications are also thinking that I am basically crazy. At one point, I thought I was schizophrenic. I would have these emotional outbursts, which is also why I believe one of my children is the way that she is. It's like a side of me, but it was a side of me at that time. But when coming up
if you're sexually active like that at a young age, especially women, because I believe that the reason why it doesn't happen as bad to young boys is because we're taking in, right? And we have a womb. So there's a lot of things spiritually that we carry, physically that we carry. Now that's doing something to your emotions. So I was very depressed a lot of the time, especially when I got pregnant. And then it's like the cycle repeated itself because the person whose child I was pregnant with also did not want to have a relationship with me. And so this spirit was literally destroying me. I'm thinking that it's helping me to gain popularity. It's helping me to have these relationships, but they're not really relationships. Um, what I'm not noticing is that the spirit it attracts people in, but then the spirit itself is ugly as well. And that is the thing that's not wanting these men or boys or whatever to bring. I'm not the person you bring home to mama.
Oh,
I'm not because they can see like, oh no, she's just the girl. I can get her easily and I can get with her, but I'm not the person. I'm not going to be with her like that, But I'm not seeing that. I'm just like, what's wrong? What's the problem? But the emotional implications of that were very devastating. So much so that I was in a mental hospital a couple of times in my younger years because I would just get really, really down and depressed. Because I'm thinking that nobody wants to love me, but I don't see that this spirit is what's really taking these things from me.
okay. So with all of that, this is probably going to be one of the most important questions that people are going to want to know. During this time, were you born again? Were you saved while you were going through these experiences?
So I accepted the Lord at 16, actually. I when I first got saved at 16, and a lot of times when people first get saved at a young age, they don't really even know, they don't know what that is. They don't know. And a lot of times you don't even get that discipleship where people tell you, okay, this is what you need to do next. Like you're walking with the Lord, those things are more prevalent now, but not when I was 16. It was just, we're all getting together, we're going on youth trips or whatever, so, and we're just all happy. However, this thing continued. Now we can go into those adult years because this thing began to actually blossom even more because we know that between the ages of 8 and 12, that was the seed that was planted. Now this thing is blooming, it's blossoming. So even after salvation at 16, going into my adult years, into my 20s, I remember continuing to be very promiscuous, continue to pursue relationships, but not knowing how to pursue relationships in a godly way. Because again, I'm not taught that.
Right.
Not knowing how to pursue so much so that I remember being a part of a ministry, and this was a very Baptist ministry. This is very religious, right, ministry where they don't really talk about the spirit, like they are spirits. They don't talk about that.
Especially in the Baptist church, I think that they tend to take a blind eye to a lot of the stuff. They know that someone's not right, but they're not
Right.
going to really address it either. And stuff, they're just going to say, "You pray about it, get healed." But they don't tell
Exactly.
you that process how to get healed.
Exactly.
So, did anyone, before we get to that adult period, did anyone know of the situations you were going through, the things you were dealing with at the age between 13 and 16?
I think later on, my mother kind of like figured something was going on with me. She even made this comment one time and said, well, you've always been promiscuous. And I'm like, I've always
Oh,
been promiscuous. This is later on, like a few
mother
years
always
later.
knows.
Yes, yes. But I don't know if that they knew the depths of it and how to deal with it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So in your adult years, you said this affected you when you were in your 20s and stuff, and being in the wrong relationships. What was the moment that you realized you needed to make a change? What was that turning point for you?
So when we grow into this manifestation of experiencing incubus, okay? Because everything I just told you was I'm just thinking the spirit of lust at that point. That's just lust, 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 lust. When I get to this Baptist church, the one I was just telling you
Okay.
about, this is a whole like thing that's happening in the church. It's not just me. Like other people are like sleeping with other people, like these different things are happening. And so it's literally never addressed. It's like we're all coming to church. We're all like chilling, at each other's houses and stuff like that, having gatherings and stuff. But this thing is never addressed. And it's so much so that I remember one time going to my pastor at the time. And I said, I need to have a conversation with her and talk to you about something. And in a joking way, he says, well, you're not pregnant, are you? And I say, no. He said, oh, okay. As long as you're not pregnant, everything's good. Because yes, literally, because by this time I had just had my fourth child, I think. Yeah, I just had my fourth child. And he's like, well, you're not pregnant. But okay, let's deal with the issue. Like,
Right.
you're saying that and you're joking, but you never like even tried to walk me through why it is I keep having intercourse with these different men and getting pregnant. Like,
Now let me ask you this: in that time period you were going in there before you had that meeting, that discussion with them, had the pastor ever mentioned, or any of the leaders ever mentioned the importance of holiness?
no, I've never heard of that. I had never heard the word holiness until I got in my 30s. Yes. So there was never teaching on any of this stuff. So I'm just thinking, okay, and then being in a church that's lust filled, and a lot of times that church and a couple of other ministries that I was a part of, I remember it was very prevalent in the worship arts. It was very prevalent. It was always the musician, the choir director. It was always some sort of lustful spirit that came from the minstrels,
Right.
from the people who are supposed to take you in to worship. And it was crazy. And so, it was never addressed. And so these are little things that are happening jokingly. And I just kind of wrote a couple of things down here because I wanted to make sure that I touched on a couple of points. So this is the pattern that happened. Lost my virginity at 13, started having multiple partners. By the time I was 16, I had 20 something partners. It was difficult for me to have monogamous relationships. And then I literally went into a place in my 20s where, even though I was in ministry, because when you asked me, was I saved? Now, at this point, I've rededicated my life. And it's still happening. I'm doing ministry and I'm literally how they say the marriage bed can't be defiled. I'm defiling other people's marriage bed. I'm sleeping with married men. Okay. All of these things are happening. And there was a place, when you asked about the turning point, there was a place where I had went on this tangent, if you will, of just being lawless when it came to, and this is what that spirit does. Because remember, it's adultery, it's incest, it's sexual immorality, and sexual immorality is anything that is not, just anything that is not of the standards or whatever. And so it can go from sleeping with children, to bestiality. It's all of these things. And so you don't recognize that this particular spirit is trying to feed itself. Remember, we talked about the lust having a craving or a desire. It's trying to feed itself. And so the more that you starve it, the more it wants, and it wants to do all of these different things. And so we have I had 3 encounters back to back before moving to another state. And then when I moved, of course, it followed me. I thought that I can get rid of it by moving.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
So I had 3 encounters before the move. This is when I realized I have to make a change. Number one of the encounters was I was intimate with this guy who was my neighbor. And he had a girlfriend, lived with the girlfriend.
Really?
They had a daughter and everything. They lived next door to me. I met the girlfriend and everything. Now, we weren't friends like that or anything, but we've had cordial conversations, stuff like this is my neighbor. I started sleeping with this guy. I don't even remember how it happened, but it was so bad to the point where his girlfriend and everybody is home, and then he's coming over to have intercourse with me. I'm the spirit is so strong,
And bold.
and bold, so strong and bold that it's happening and they're right next door. And the spirit is so strong, I leave work on lunch breaks to go get with this guy. Yes. The second encounter after that, I start sleeping with a guy who I met through an online, because again, The spirit is doing all this crazy stuff. Now, this, well, I say online. This is before I even knew about like online dating. This was like the thing where you could like call
like
on the
old school
phone.
party lines and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So I met this guy through that, and I start having. Now you hear what I'm saying. I met some stranger on a phone who I start having intercourse with. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So I meet this guy, and we probably should pray before I start talking about this.
You into it now.
I
You
probably
gonna
should
pray
have
at the
prayed.
end though.
Praise the Lord, which I probably should have prayed. But Lord, cover them. Lord, cover all who is watching and listening in the name of Yahushua. We bless you. We honor you. Okay. So then I start having intercourse with this guy. And this is where I really began to understand this is not of God. And it's more than just fornicating. Because this guy begins to say things to me that are very dark and demonic. Like he starts telling me he wants to devour me. He starts telling me this stuff. And I'm just like, what? This is weird. Like, this is not cool. He starts referring to me as a piece of meat, like I'm food. So, and I said years ago, I was going to write a book about this called like Sleeping with the Enemy or something like that, because literally I felt like he was the devil, like reincarnate.
Well, it's also one of the things too when you're in a position where you're in sin. Okay, we're just say sin in general, be whatever. We all know that all sin leads to destruction. So at some point in time, when we're in the act of performing this sin, we don't know how far we are away from that path of destruction. A lot of times it could be right around the corner. It could be the next time you commit it. It could be a month from now, a year from now. You just never know. But apparently you had the insight to understand that the things that he was saying were demonic.
Oh yeah.
So where did it change with that relationship?
I think I ended up cutting that off because after like the third or fourth time, maybe the third time that he said that, because of course initially in the beginning when the relationship started, he wasn't saying stuff like that. It just evolved into that. And so after like the third time or so, I was like, yeah, I don't like that. Like that's weird. Like, stop. Why are you referring to me like that? I'm a person. Like, no. And so that ended after that. He also had a girlfriend that he lived with. So this is a pattern. It's a pattern of 3 different things that happened back to back. The other guy had a girlfriend. So it was never a person that was just single. Remember that lust spirit, it longs for something that is forbidden.
Right. It's the law of attraction.
Yes. So these people were, I couldn't like have them in a relationship because they were already with somebody. So he was also in a relationship. The last one before I moved, I was sleeping with a felon who, I don't even remember what he initially went to jail for, his charges or whatever, but basically he was a felon and we worked together at this restaurant or whatever. And then I started sleeping with him, and he also lived with his girlfriend. But he would come over and would check on me. And this one kind of seemed like it was trying to morph more into a relationship, but it wasn't going to.
Okay.
But he would help me with my bills. Like, he would actually help me pay bills and different things like that. Like as if he was concerned about like my well-being and things. And so in that sense, I started getting, of course, attached. And I didn't want like him to go back to his girlfriend. I'm like, well, why aren't you with me now? Like, you're already paying. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You're paying over there and you're paying over here. Like why don't you just cut the other one out?
All right. So out of all of that, what was the turning point?
That was the turning point. So that third one, so after that, because it was like a pattern. It's like back to back to back. I'm like, nothing is changing. Okay. It's like I'm going in that definition of insanity. Going in cycles, going in circles. So I moved. I decided things weren't working for me there in the area that I was living in. I was far away from family. And it was because this is affecting, remember you asked me the question about emotionally. This is not just affecting me emotionally, like this is actually affecting my ability to be financially stable. I'm my finances, because in addition to all of these things, I am an alcoholic. I'm drinking like so much. A lot of my money is being spent on alcohol because, again, this is a spirit. I want to be in control of it, but I actually don't want to do what I'm doing. I have to drink. I have to do something to actually, I'm like intoxicating myself so that I can't, because I wouldn't just do this without, that. Now, eventually it did morph into I didn't have to have a drink. But in the beginning, it was like I was drinking to like make myself comfortable, make myself not think about like what I'm getting ready to do, try to get my mind to go somewhere else. However, that's another open door to allow this thing to increase even more. Why? Because I'm drinking my spirits now.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part right there, because we always don't understand, like, we understand where the seed is created, right? And it sometimes it can grow from there and stuff. And let's say we move away from something, it doesn't happen again for a while. But when we introduce something else into the situation, that thing can rapidly grow. It's like a tumor. It just rapidly grows. You gotta shut off that blood supply in order to kill that tumor, which is really what we deal with. We're dealing with lust. It's really a tumor in the spirit that's attached to us, that's growing in us. We want to get rid of it. We don't know how to get rid of it. And so it's interesting how you say you were an alcoholic at the time when all of this was going on. And so you realized you needed to change. You were alcoholic. You realized you needed to change. You left the environment, moved back, I guess, closer with family or something at
Yes.
that
So I
point.
moved. I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be of course it is a whole new start because it was a whole new life. We leave, and I have kids, of course. So we leave, literally pack up my van and the clothes on our back and whatever we can fit in the van is what we moved with. Everything else was left behind. I said this was going to be a fresh start. I was going to make amends with some of my relatives and things like that. And for a while I was good. And I said, I'm just going to go continue to do ministry, do the things that I do. And then that thing peeped its head back up again. And one of the ways that it peeps its head up again is that, first of all, if you don't seek deliverance, if you don't renounce these things, because once you have the knowledge of what it is, now you need to start renouncing it, not just continue to go along with it, but you have to renounce it. And that didn't happen until I moved, because I did meet someone and meet when I say someone, not a man, but I met a friend of mine. She had dealt with some similar things. And I met her in this ministry that I became a part of, and she kind of helped me through that because she was actually speaking out against the stuff that happened to her from a young age. And that's when I realized, she's actually the first person that ever mentioned deliverance to me before. This is the first time I ever heard the word deliverance. And this is in 2014, 2015.
Okay.
First time I ever heard deliverance before.
Wow.
Yeah. I was behind.
So you never heard the teaching about holiness, and you never heard the word about deliverance until well into your adult life after you left the environment. So how did that process look for you? Or did something you started seeking about, understanding what deliverance is and stuff? So tell me about that.
Absolutely. So she had a ministry where she would travel and give these talks and stuff about what she experienced. And she would even do like these interactions and different things. And so in the midst of that, of course, she would do an altar call to pray for people and things like that. And that's when I got to actually see people who were, they would pray and then call out different things, and people who were actually being delivered from these things. Now, there are also people out there that don't think that there's this thing that you need deliverance, or that there is deliverance, or whatever. They're just like, it's really just another form of healing. Mm-hmm. But the thing that you have to understand is that in I believe it's in 2 Corinthians 10:5, where it talks about casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, right? And you're bringing into captivity those thoughts. Anything that is not cast down has to be cast out.
That's real.
So literally, these intrusive thoughts that I'm having, because now I begin to have intrusive thoughts. This is where Incubus comes in. Because now I begin to have intrusive thoughts that I need to basically do something with somebody. I need to have somebody. I'm having these dreams, and I have these dreams. It's going to sound weird, but I'm having these dreams where I literally just see male body parts. No face, no, just male body parts.
So the spirit got to a place where it now felt like I would kind of help me phrase this a little bit. kind of felt like it owned you to the point that it would entice you to things that you were trying to get delivered from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a scripture that talks about the sin taking over, or the sin, it's like what I want to do, I don't do,
Right.
because now it's the sin and that's what happened. When sin is fully manifested in that way, it is now the sin that's taking over and is doing those things, because you haven't renounced those things, denounced those things, and you have not surrendered these things to the Lord. So yes, I began to see deliverance happen. I began to understand it. I even began to go home and do some self-deliverance where I just call out things myself. And then I come and touch and agree with people. And the biggest piece to that is getting past the embarrassment.
Now, let me ask you that before we go into that a little bit more, where you said you went home and did even self-deliverance. So the self-deliverance, I'm sure, took place before you ever had real deliverance, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of like, that's interesting that you say that, because most people that were in your position that you were in at that time don't understand what self-deliverance is if they never did through actual real deliverance. So
Right.
you kind of did it in reverse a little bit.
Right.
So what was your experience going through self-deliverance? Did you have some troubles, some difficulties at the time period?
I just remember crying a lot. I remember as I was confessing my sin to the Lord and as I was renouncing these things, it was a lot of crying. And because a lot of people think that it's always got to be this whole super dramatic thing, but it can come out any exhale,
Right.
a
Coughing,
burp,
burping,
a
yep.
cough, all
A
of those things. So
yawn.
I'm crying, I'm yawning, I'm burping, I'm doing all those things. I remember, and I feel like it's important to understand that it can happen that way, only because a lot of times when people try to go up for deliverance, or the person tries to administer deliverance on somebody, if they have not already agreed in private, if they have not already made up in their mind or confessed the thing, then that's the reason why the spirit won't come out. So you're trying to administer deliverance on somebody who hasn't even verbally said it themselves, but you're trying to call it out of them, but they haven't said it. They haven't said they don't want to be in agreement with the thing anymore, right? And so I think that's why people have such a hard time with that and struggle with it, and why we see so many of these videos where people are wrestling with the thing,
Right. Rolling on the floor and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to come to a place in your life where you're like, okay, this is insanity. I'm going in cycles. Enough is enough. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I want to be different. I want to be who God has called me to be, and not all of these other things.
So did you ever get to a place where you actually did see a deliverance minister or anything of that nature?
No, not, well, we all should be administering deliverance. Let me just make that clear. So I wouldn't call them deliverance ministers,
Okay.
but they were people who prayed with me and things like that. I don't think they knew the depths of it, but I began to learn the depths of it. Okay. And so anytime I knew that I was under some sort of, or felt that I was under some sort of oppression, because I dealt with this spirit for so many years, I would go and confess. I would go to the altar. I would say, here, I would tell them specifically what I want them to pray for me about, because I started understanding the depths of deliverance more, because there are a lot of ministries that shy away from it. They don't want to tarry. They don't want to deal with the spirit. They don't want to do all those things. I remember one time I was crying out at the altar, and I distinctly remember a minister telling me that I needed to calm down, but it wasn't really me. I know now that wasn't really me, because I thought that was weird. And I remember dropping down to the floor, and I remember yelling out, but I remember yelling out, but like it was uncontrollably. And I remember the minister getting down there with me and saying, you need to calm down.
So he had no idea what you were actually dealing with. Okay.
Mhm.
I was going to ask about that. So did you have any people in ministry that was willing to walk you through this?
Right.
Not to say in deliverance per se. You mentioned your
Right.
one friend that you were going to her events with. Were there anyone else that I would say prophetically saw what you were dealing with and willing to intercede and pray for you on your behalf to help you get delivered and get processed through that transition?
At this time, I don't think they saw, only because I didn't want them to see. Because now I've been dealing with the spirit for at least 20 years. So now I'm at a place where I can hide it. So they don't know that I'm having these, what I would consider escapades. I'm now in a place where I am what they call playing church.
Oh.
Because I know how to go to church and do church.
Okay.
but you don't know what I'm doing when I'm not at church. So yeah, I learned to hide it really well. And the fact of the matter is, when you say prophetic people, the pastor, would say, he would do things and stuff and kind of venture into the prophetic because he's the head sheep of the house who should see what's happening with the sheep, who should be seeking God. But there's still that aspect of religion and that religious spirit that is there that blocks them from being able to go deeper and actually see that. So I really believe it was because they weren't spiritually open to those things potentially happening with me. But they could see outwardly that there was like a kind of a cycle I would go into as far as like financially, and I wasn't being able to sustain, but they didn't know the end, like the actual back ends of it,
Okay.
of why that was happening.
So in saying that, they never identified the sin nature that brought you into those different financial situations to help you navigate through it.
Right, because I don't ever think they knew I was an alcoholic. I didn't stop drinking until 2017. But I don't think they knew that.
Normally, that's something that's very evident to tell when someone's dealing with alcoholism, because
Yeah.
there's very telltale signs with that. But that just shows me that they weren't spiritually in tune to understand the problems with the sheep
Mm-hmm.
to help them navigate through whatever they're dealing with.
Right.
Stuff, which is a very prominent thing in most religious circles.
Yeah. Because it's just like any other ministry. Even though this ministry is where I felt like I did get delivered and I did get free, because some of the things they taught, because they did start teaching about those things, deliverance, holiness. They did start teaching about that. However, there was limitations still. And so I do feel like the limitations that were there were because that spirit of religiosity, churchanese, all the things, that you do. And it was like any other church that I had been to. If you show up and if you're there, you're going to be used. It doesn't matter if you're anointed. It doesn't matter if you're called to this. If you're there every time the church doors open and you show up, you're going to be used.
And it doesn't matter if your hands are dirty.
That part.
Wow.
That part. And that's happening all over the world.
So as you identify this change that you know you need to do, if things you're dealing with the alcoholism, you're dealing with the spirit of fornication, all this stuff like this time period, in your latter adult life and stuff, you're getting to this process, you're understanding that there needs to be this change in your journey. So what was one of the things that I would say to be the most challenging part of the recovery? Because I want viewers to really understand that this is not something that happened overnight. You're dealing with 20 years of hurt. You're dealing with 20 years of dealing with the spirit. And so now you identify that there's a problem. You're working your way through this problem while you're dealing with another problem. And now you realize the leaders don't really see what you're dealing with because they can't help you navigate through it. What were some of the most challenging parts of that recovery process?
Oh my goodness. One of the most challenging parts was learning to love myself, forgiving myself. Because of course, through that process, you do have to forgive the people who hurt you, the people who, like I said, back early on, may have planted those seeds. And then forgiving the people who hurt you in each of these relationships where you felt that they did something wrong to you when they were just seeing you as what you were putting out there, what you were portraying. So it was easier for me to forgive those people, but it was not so easy to forgive myself. One of the things that I didn't mention is that through this process, I was married twice. And I don't really count the first marriage. I know we're supposed to be, but I don't really count the first marriage. But the second marriage, in that process, remember I said earlier that you are unable to establish, because the spirit it wants the attention, so this thing makes it so that you don't actually have genuine relationships, or you can't bond in a relationship with your spouse. It wants the forbidden thing. So prior to marriage, it was fine. But once I got married to my spouse, that spirit it didn't want to do anything. So I didn't even want to have sex with my spouse. So I go from always having sex, always doing these things, to being with my spouse and not wanting to do anything at all, which then he says led him to, go out and sleep with other people. But I actually married someone who was a sex addict. So that didn't make it any better. So through the process, having to forgive myself of that and forgive myself of the things that happened in that marriage that ended up being a failed marriage because of these things. Because it doesn't allow you, again, some people even call the incubus and succubus spirit like spirit husband and spirit wife, because it doesn't allow you to, then when you do get in a relationship, and you're actually doing this covenant, having this covenant relationship with an actual spouse under God, the two things are going to disagree, because this is not a spirit of God. But now you're trying to come into covenant and do this thing under God. It's not gonna work.
And one thing that I've kind of learned about these two spirits, when they're when someone's dealing with those spirits stuff, and you mentioned the spirit, husband, spirit, wives stuff. What I've always been told or have learned through my studies is that the spirit husband and spirit wives tend to be people who have dealt with this spirit themselves. So you literally have two people, male and female, dealing with the same spirit category. I can say best way I can say it. And that's what helps create that spirit husband and wife. And then they'll go out and be like, oh yeah, this is my husband or this is my wife and stuff. But you've never met that person. You've never been in close contact with this person, but you feel in the spirit, this person is supposed to be your husband or wife. I was always told that that's someone who's dealing with incubus and succubus at some level.
Wow.
It might not be identified as them that that's what it is, but that's what I've always kind of like learned from other ministers. Like that's how you know someone is dealing with that, when they're quickly to say, "Oh yeah, the Lord told me you were my husband." The Lord didn't see this whole thing right here. The scripture says, "The man that finds a wife findeth a good thing."
Right.
But you have women that say, "I know this will be my husband." That's always been my clear indicator that you're dealing with the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was always taught that a man should be the one that finds.
Mm-hmm.
And that when he does find, he finds a good thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now you have this thing operating in reverse, perpetuating a lot of messed up relationships in the kingdom, in the world per se, that can never get into full alignment with God because you have not yet identified you're dealing with the spirit.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
those are some of the very challenging things that we see happening. Now, for you, in a sense, you're getting to this place of understanding, you're walking through this journey point and everything in that nature. What helps you to stay motivated to stay, okay, I want to be free from this?
The motivation was ministry. Even though I had already been doing ministry prior to being actually delivered from the spirit. By the way, in 2017, when I told you that, I hadn't stopped drinking till 2017, that's actually when everything stopped. So I'd stopped drinking, I stopped, fornicating, all of those. It was like a cold turkey moment, like literally everything.
Wow.
In 2017. And so it was really ministry that kept me. I had just gotten ordained a minister the year before in 2016, and minister of dance. And then 2017, I opened my academy. And so all of the turning point, the real turning point actually happened then. And the motivation to stay that way was seeing lives changed by the ministry that I had, that I had opened, the Fire Dance Academy ministry, as well as other things that I would do. I would travel and go and teach and different things. And so people were very blessed by it. And I felt that it was something that I needed to, because what I noticed was a lot of people that I would encounter, and especially a lot of people that came to my ministry, to Fire Dance, they had experienced similar things.
Okay.
And so I recognized where my audience was, and who I was supposed to be ministering to. So that's something that really kept me. And I think practically, the motivation part practically is not allowing your gates to be clouded, like really distorted, is the word I'm looking for, because a lot of times we will, engage in ministry and worship and things like that, but then turn around and then allow your eye gate to also engage in things that are coming through the television that are going to spark up other things. And so I made sure to keep all of those things pure. When I stopped drinking, for example, for about 2 or 3 years, I would not even, when I would go to the grocery store, I would not go down the wine aisles. I would avoid that aisle for like the first 2, 3 years. I could not even pass through there. So it was a lot of avoiding different things because I'm like, no, I'm going to continue to, seek God in these areas. And so, yeah, that the motivation was really ministry and helping others.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you mentioned at this moment you started your academy. I know this is not something we talked about discussing, but I want to touch on this real quick. After you notice your audience in your ministry, I know me and you've had discussions about this before in this arena of dance, that this spirit is very prevalent in a lot of different dance communities around. I've been around dancers for a long time around my life too. I never even knew it existed there until I think me and you started dating. You started pointing, and I was like, "That's what I was seeing all this time," and didn't really understand because I remember there particularly there were some certain instances where I felt like the sin affected the ministry part to where now it's just performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in knowing that, would you have something to say to those in ministry that are dealing with this particular spirit and want to get to a new level, but they're dealing with this spirit? What would you recommend that they go
Absolutely.
through?
Number one, I would recommend they stop dancing. Because that spirit, what I've noticed is at the many conferences that I've gone to, you need to step back and allow yourself to get some deliverance, to go through healing and things like that. Because if you're dealing with it and you're struggling with it, it's coming out in the dance, it's coming out in the ministry. And so a lot of the conferences and things that I would go to, I could tell that spirit was on them, and I could also see where that kind of law of attraction thing was happening with other people who were in the ministry, and really same-sex attraction was very prevalent, both on the women and the men, same-sex attraction. So I think it's important to, and I know that a lot of people will be like, press your way through, not with this.
Right.
You can't press your way through with this. You don't need to be up singing. You don't need to be playing on those strings, because remember what the strings did. When David played the harp, this was a minstrel that God used to heal. This was a minstrel God used to help set Saul free from that spirit that was tormenting him, right? And so you use that, and you're up here, doing whatever you're doing, fornicating, all these things. And now there's going to be a different spirit that's going to be released if you continue to do that. So if you're continuing to be a musician, a dancer, or whatever, where you're having to, because remember, the worshipers go out first. So if you're continuing, what spirit are you releasing in the atmosphere now then? So that's why I would say, no, you can't press your way through that. You need to sit down for a time period and get some healing and adjust.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting, because I think a lot of people don't understand that part right there. I think the first thing you said was sit down, and most people don't want to do that. They feel like they're okay,
Which is
they're
why they'll
good.
try to continue to hide it. Remember, I told you I got good at hiding this thing at the ministry that I was at, but they'll continue to hide it because, number one, they don't want to be told to sit down if they release it to somebody or if they share it with somebody. Now, what the issue I have is that you do have a lot of ministries who do know about the secret sins of the people and still let them operate, and that's even worse.
So someone dealing with this particular spirit, and they understand now through this interview that they need to get delivered. They need
Yeah.
to be free in order to reach the level that God wants them to operate. Okay. Would you have some advice for those people who have identified they need to make a change?
Absolutely. Number one, they need to identify the door. Identify the door that was open. Remember, I talked about how I identified the door of lust that was open early on. And you need to identify and acknowledge it, that this is where this thing came in because I opened myself up to this person or that person or whatever. So you need to identify that. And then secondly, if you confess it, identify it, confess it, right? Don't just like let it linger in your mind, because this is all about the thought life manifesting into the physical. So before you even think about fornication, it's a thing, it's a thought, it's that intrusive thought that I talked about earlier. And if you don't cast it down, it's going to have to be cast out. And then thirdly, pray, right? Definitely pray about it and find someone who you can trust to talk about it. Somebody, that's very spiritually inclined and things like that you can talk to about it, so that you can see what the next steps are. Are you needing to go through deliverance or whatever? What is the walk look like from there? But I think the biggest thing is identifying the open door. And I have a couple of things here that I do want to talk about in regards to open doors. So open doors can be anything from childhood, touching or playing, which is what happened to me. Looking at magazines. That was another thing back in the day before we had internet and stuff. There was the magazines, and I would see the magazines. Looking at magazines, pornography, or not even really pornography, but a lot of these movies today are like soft porn. Like there's a lot of sexual scenes, a lot of stuff. And especially if you're a single person, that is difficult for you to just be sitting there watching that, right? Molestation. Because sometimes it's not always something that you opened up yourself, but someone else
introduced it to you.
Introduced it, and then that's how it happened. And then once you identify these open doors, you also need to identify if it has become a stronghold in your life. And that's what happened to me. Eventually, it became a stronghold where I felt like it was irresistible. I had to do something. But it wasn't me. It was the spirit that was craving, and I needed to feed the spirit. So identifying strongholds. Strongholds can be guilt and self-condemnation, which I went through a lot. Troubled thought life, which I talked about, intrusive thoughts. Instability. I was very unstable with not only financial stuff, but relationships. Everything was like off. Everything was unstable. Reoccurring dreams. And then the biggest one for strongholds is your spiritual separation from God.
Wow.
Because the more that you indulge that spirit, the more that you're giving it an offering, the less you're giving an offering to God. The word of God says that we are to be living sacrifices, holy and acceptable unto him. If we're not sacrificing ourselves as a living sacrifice unto God, then what are we sacrificing unto? Unto idols?
Right.
So we have to recognize that it will spiritually separate you from God. You're reading your Bible less, you're praying less, you're doing more of the things that you enjoy and are pleasurable to your flesh.
Amen. Amen. So I just want to thank you for sharing your story today. I think it's been very, very impactful, I would say.
Yes.
And stuff to talk about this and just for your bravery in talking about this, because a lot of people wouldn't be as transparent as you have been during this interview. And I think it's going to help a lot of people in the future just get free. So I want to take a little bit of time here real quick to just talk about your new season 3. What can we expect from season 3 of Healing from Trauma?
Oh my goodness. So definitely things like this particular interview and other things that I'll be exposing so that you can heal, because these things have to be exposed so you can heal. This particular topic in specifically is something that people don't want to talk about. Right. It's so private. It's so dirty, but it has to be talked about. It has to be revealed. And so that's going to kind of be where we're going with season 3, is just uncovering some of those things that we may be dealing with that we haven't wanted to share or haven't wanted to talk to anybody about. And because of it, it will torment you. Like I said, I call this Tormented by Incubus. It will begin to torment you. And so I want to actually thank you as well for sitting through this interview. I know it was tough sitting through this interview because, there were things that's why I said we probably should have prayed before. There were things, of course, that I revealed, that I said that I probably have not actually said to you. But you did know some of my journey. But that's definitely what you guys can expect in season.
Wait a minute. I know this is going to help a lot of people. 'Cause like you said, this is something that people don't talk about. And I know from my own experiences, this is some of the stuff that needs to be talked about. Not just in private, but like even in conferences. I've heard it talked maybe a couple of times in conferences, but they kind of mentioned it and skirted right past it. And I think this is going to be so freeing to a lot of people that it's going to open that door for them to really start evaluating themselves and stuff to get deliver from this and stuff. And maybe some other things that this might even show you. You might have fell victim to a plethora of other issues
Yeah.
and stuff. It might not be just these two spirits, because we know there's gluttony, there's all this
All
other
of the
stuff that goes
things.
with it. That's
And the
a lot of
world
times
has
we introduce
and the
this.
world has so many remedies for this, but
Yes,
we
they
don't have
do.
any remedies.
Right.
Like they have the Alcoholics Anonymous, like they have like groups for like sex addicts and stuff like that. The world has all of those things, but we don't educate on it. So people who deal with this would have to go to those types of things if they wanted to, get help with it. They would go to like these worldly, groups that talk on these things. Why can't we have that?
Right.
That's what we need. We need things so that people can overcome these things, because they are in the Word. They talk about the seducing spirits and the doctrines of devils. It talks about that.
Yes, it does. Yes, it
So-
does. So again, thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to hearing more from season 3, as you mentioned. So we'll see you soon.
All right. God bless.
Healing from trauma, it's lifting me higher, higher, me higher, lifting me higher. From the ashes I rise, my soul's on fire, my soul's on fire, fire. Breath is in my veins, courage in my stride. I'm the captain of my soul, the storm's my guide.